think at the end of the day, it's less about mom and pop or corporate and more about amateur versus pro. And I was reading in a book, I don't think it used this exact words, but it was, amateurs wing it, professionals have a plan. And at the end of the day, I think that's what separates people who are treating this like a DIY hobby business versus something where maybe their family is going to survive on this long term.
You're listening to the Venue RX podcast.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Venue RX. And on this show, we are passionate about documenting and sharing best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues. And we have a number of different styles of show, many different series. We've talked to actual wedding venue owners, which is so much fun because we kind of get to hear boots on the ground, what's going on inside their businesses and what challenges they face and the wins that they're experiencing as well. We also talk to industry professionals on a variety of topics, and that is one of the shows that we have for you today. And I'm really excited to welcome back to the show someone who I've looked up to, who's been a mentor and who has a wonderful business. Sam Jacobson, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Jonathan. I love repeat opportunities to talk with people about things you can do to grow the business.
Definitely, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Your company, Ideaction, you do consulting. You have a number of different things you do. Can you, just for anyone who's not familiar with your work, just give a quick synopsis of what you do?
Yeah, so my company, Ideaction, I co-own it with my wife, Katie. We do business coaching. We have website copywriting is a big part of the services that we offer. We have 6 full-time copywriters on our team. We also host online programs where we kind of have done with you and done for you coaching programs. And then we do in-person retreats where we do deep dives on businesses to figure out what's next for the company. So full suite of services, wherever you're at and growing your business, we're there to help.
That's so huge, because I think a lot of us as business owners, sometimes we don't know, right? And it sometimes takes someone else looking at what we're doing to create a little bit of objectivity. That's huge. What's your background in? I don't know if we really covered this extensively. I think we touched on it briefly, but I don't know how extensively we covered your background in our previous episode.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because I think it's really important and a little bit of our secret sauce. So my background and my wife's background, we're both venue managers. She worked at Four Seasons for 14 years as a director of catering, and she had 8 years of luxury venue sales experience. Before that, I worked at a premium resort up in Washington State where I was the lodging director and event sales manager for 8 years. So I sold venue and catering, in-house catering directly to couples, booked 300 couples, $10 million in overall revenue for the property. After that, I did a couple of years as a director of operations for Todd Events, large-scale design decor planning company out of Texas. And then for the last 6 years, I've been working exclusively with wedding and event professionals in the coaching capacity. So I've been in the wedding industry since 2006. My wife's been in since 1998. I know that dates us a little bit, but we like to think about the gray in my beard, at least, is, a level of wisdom that has taken a long time to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, given the fact that you've been through a couple of different economic cycles and, a lot of fear, I think, that exists right now around just what's happening in the market. My leads have slowed down. I'm not getting maybe as many bookings. Is this a temporary thing? Is this kind of like something kind of fallout from COVID? Obviously some of the financial news that's happening, right now as we're recording this. I'm excited to chat with you today because I want to focus on leads. I want to focus on some of the marketing, kind of that front side of the funnel. You have a lot of experience, and your wife has a lot of experience in corporate, more corporate side of events. And obviously you've got tons of experience now with also probably like more mom and pop organizations. What do you think, startup organizations, families maybe who have come together to start a wedding venue in their barn or on their property or things like that, folks who don't have a corporate structure and a background and a CFO and all these different things, what do you think that they can learn from this different world of events that is much more structured, that is much more kind of organized because of the corporate direction that it comes from.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up. I think at the end of the day, it's less about mom and pop or corporate and more about amateur versus pro. And I was reading in a book, I don't think it uses exact words, but it was, amateurs wing it, professionals have a plan. And at the end of the day, I think that's what separates people who are treating this like a DIY hobby business versus something where maybe their family is going to survive on this long term. At some point, we decide we want to open up a business, and a lot of us decide to bootstrap it or DIY, even if we're doing something big like a venue. And it's good to try and do things on your own, but doing things on your own, especially when you don't have any experience, will only get you so far. At some point, you'll hit a ceiling. And for some people, that ceiling is higher, some it's lower. It's basically wherever your natural ability will get you. And at that point, you've got to start doing things that are known to get you from where you are to where you want to be, rather than trying to find your way through trial and error. So I would recommend that no matter what kind of business you're running and no matter what kind of field you're in the event industry, and if you're a mom and pop or you're backed by, investors, you should always come at it with a plan and start with a model of what has worked for others in the past, and then tweak that based on your current situation. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to come up with something on your own. There's no reason to waste a bunch of time going through and learning from your mistakes when all those mistakes, frankly, have probably already been made. And it's way easier to learn from other people and their mistakes than it is to make it on your own and have to learn from those again.
That's so true, and that resonates, and I'm smiling because we actually hired, first, I totally 100% believe in that. In fact, we actually hired you to come in. You and I chatted several different times, and, the insight that you provided on pricing and just how our packages were positioned at our venues were huge. So, case in point, definitely putting my money where my mouth is. But we actually also hired a team to come in and kind of look at our company as a whole. And it's hilarious because we're going through, it's a multi-day thing, and we're listening to all these different things that they're presenting us with. And these folks have been in business, 30 plus years, very experienced team, just running businesses. And all of these things that they're talking about are like mistakes that we've made or just continue to make over years. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my gosh, like we should have done this way earlier. It would have saved time and honestly saved a lot of money.
It would have. I think that's one of the things that I try and remind my clients is that you shouldn't trip over dimes to pick up pennies. And, I think as a young, company, you're bootstrapping it. You're trying to do everything you possibly can on your own, like a startup would, where you're putting in the hours and, you're getting some people together with some good ideas. And that's a great place to start. But at some point, you have to recognize that there's a shortcut through all the mess that you're probably creating. And somebody knows the way through. And the faster you can get to what you're best at and identify the path forward, the sooner you're going to get to where you want to go.
So true. Let's jump into that because I want to talk about that. I have a question for you as we look at kind of this very evolving, changing landscape. What do you think the place of AI, artificial intelligence, has for wedding venues or even just wedding and event pros? Some people are using it as a tool, kind of like, oh, let's put in a prompt. And some people are taking it really seriously, right? Where do you sit? What are your thoughts on it as someone who's a professional copywriter and you've been in this space a long time? How are you viewing AI?
I've got my eyes on it, that's for sure, and I have for a long time. I think, a few years ago when you had, chatbots, for instance, that were on websites, I think that was when I was tuning in more than I had before, how robots or machines might be able to help out. And, I've read some pretty interesting numbers that are eye-opening when it comes to, especially Gen Z and their interest in chatting, for instance, versus picking up the phone and calling. And whether that's for customer service or even just quick sales questions that people have on websites. It's something that we haven't necessarily gotten into, but I've got it on the list of projects to do when I slow down with the existing projects I have. So I think that there's definitely some upsides to for instance, using AI or chatbots on websites. I think that it's great to use it as a wayfinder to steer people to the right information or resources, or to answer frequently asked questions. Obviously, over the last couple months, things like ChatGPT have been at the top of the news. And I remember a couple months ago kind of goofing around with it. I was knocked over by it, thought it was kind of amusing. We were hanging out and chatting about it. And then I went back home and I dug into it a little bit. And I think the way that I see it right now is that something like ChatGPT for copywriters, for instance, is not necessarily an existential threat or even a job threat. I think if anything, it's just a tool. I mean, I go through and I look at, for instance, our photography clients, where they're say photographing weddings, and over an 8-hour period, 10-hour period, they might come away with 3,000 or 4,000 digital images, and then they have to go through and cull and then edit, and then they could finally present the finished album to the client, or at least the finished gallery to the client. And I think about what's happened over the last 18 to 24 months with the editing and culling applications that are out there using AI. And I think how helpful that's been for them, where they can cull a 3,000 image gallery using AI in under 30 minutes, and how much time that saves them, 4, 5, 10 hours. And then the editing, they can upload the presets that they have, and all of the work, or most of it, will be done. And what's left for them is the most important work, that human touch that only a human at this point can do. I think when I look at what applications like ChatGPT or whatever is going to come along with Bard, or what other AI for copywriting, is that we're going to be able to use it as a tool, and we're going to use it to do some of the hard work. At the end of the day, machines aren't thinking. Okay, they're not creating something from scratch. They're going through and they're consolidating and collating, terabytes of information in milliseconds. And that kind of research is really, really productive for a copywriter to use. But the creativity and putting it together and connecting the dots in creative ways is not there, at least in a way that our company's standards would be met. So I don't feel threatened by it. I think it's a great tool. I think all the other fields in the wedding industry get to use tools like AI is currently available, or at least starting to become available, for copywriters. And that's exciting.
Yeah, I love that you compared it to the photography and the culling, because you're totally right. I mean, there's a difference between just culling through the 3,000 plus images, and then a difference between actually deciding, those images that you have that are good. Now, how are you going to create the album? How are you going to be? It's kind of the skilled work on top of that. And so using the AI tools as really the workhorse of what you do, so that you can refine your skills, and it almost allows you to become better at your craft, because it's taking out some of the rote work, right? The work that's just,
It is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We have a blog content copywriter, for instance, on our team, who handles all the blog content, which is a service we offer for our existing website copywriting clients as a continuous service that we can offer. And I remember having a conversation with the team a couple months ago, and I was telling her, I was like, this is something that's going to save you hours every week by not having to go through and research things online, because you can just ask ChatGPT to do it. And so, like, when we go through and we think about laying out the structure of something, whether it's a blog post or it could be a bio, which we used it for last week. It was take all of this information that we plug in as an input, and then the output, it's 80% what we want. But then that 20% is our time most valuably used. And so, how much more work can we get done? How much more creative can we be? How much better can we deliver what it is that our clients want most from us, rather than just a consolidation of information, which is in many ways what something like ChatGPT is doing.
That's so well said. You mentioned calls a little bit earlier, and I'm curious your take on calls. Do you think calling is still important as a part of a venue manager or sales manager's job, or do you think it's kind of going extinct because this new generation is more interested in chatting or using different messaging options?
I think that human beings want to connect with other human beings, and nothing will ever replace that. I think that, the odds are that the more you talk to a potential client, the more likely you are to book them. In today's marketplace, it's so easy to get lost with all of the digital communication that goes back and forth. So many different chat threads, so many different social media platforms, so many emails coming across. It just becomes really challenging for a venue or any vendor to stand out. And so one of the best things you can do is reach out and cut through the noise by connecting human to human with potential clients.
Is that like what medium should people consider using?
Well, my general rule is to always respond in the medium that the prospect reached out to you. So if they DM'd you, you DM back. If they texted, you text back. If they called, you call back. If they send you a video memo, you send a video message back to them. The goal, I think, is to get to as close of a face-to-face experience as is convenient for both parties, and that's really going to be Zoom. So if somebody inquires through DM or maybe they drop an email through the contact form on the website, you're going to respond in whatever medium that is, but then you're going to suggest that you all move over to a call. And then in that suggestion, I recommend giving people the option of should we do a face-to-face through Zoom so we can see each other and connect that way and share screens if we need to, or do you prefer phone number? And then to eliminate the back and forth, I recommend putting, if Zoom, here's the link. If it's phone number, is this the best number to call? Confirming the number that they left in the form or asking them what number they prefer to be reached at. What I've found is that while Zoom is preferable for people to see each other, so much in body language and even your background can communicate and advance the sale for you. Some people don't like to get on Zoom. Some people don't want to put a face on or do their hair. Before I got going on this podcast, I walked upstairs 10 minutes ago and I put a collared shirt on. Why? Because I knew this would be on video, but I normally don't work in a collared shirt. I work in a t-shirt and a hoodie. And so I think that there's, for good reason, interest on people to look good, look presentable, have a great backdrop. And so it's best to shoot for that. But if they don't feel comfortable, I wouldn't force them.
I love that you said Zoom, and I'm thinking, I'm curious how many venues are maybe missing out on this opportunity, because so much of what we do, on-site at venues is there in person. So you kind of, at least from my thinking before this conversation right here, we want to get people to the property. But do you think that's maybe a huge missed opportunity from venue managers, sales managers, that actually it would help to kind of connect them and develop more rapport by doing a Zoom prior to actually coming out to the property?
I do. I think that there's two different ways you can use Zoom as a venue manager. One is that you can use it early on during a discovery call. If you're inundated with inquiries, for instance, and your calendar's filling up every year and you're really just trying to pick great clients or charge more money for your dates or maybe steer them towards shoulder weekdays or shoulder season dates in general, having discovery calls is an important part. You don't want to spend an hour to an hour and a half walking around with anybody who's interested in touring with you. You don't have that much time. I don't think, at least if you're doing very well with your calendar filling up. So I would recommend screening people with a discovery call. So Zoom would be totally appropriate then. One of the other upsides to Zoom is that you can use it post-tour when you are looking to close the deal. This is probably, I'm going to say, the biggest takeaway from our entire conversation will be this little nugget right here. So if you're tuning in, stop what you're doing in the background and pay attention. If you are not closing deals very well, it is likely because you are doing a site tour and then saying, well, let me know what you guys want to do and I'll be here to secure a date with a deposit. There's no opportunity to close the deal like that. You need to create an opportunity to have a conversation to discuss which option they're going to move forward with. And that's best done on Zoom when they have the information in front of them, when all the decision makers have had a chance to go through your proposal and now can ask questions of you directly. And so Zoom is a great way to do that. It looks like this. You schedule the tour, you have a site inspection, you walk around with a couple and you get to know them, you connect with them. and then you say, hey, this was great. Who else is making the decision with you? Oftentimes it's mom or dad or both or any number of people. And you say, okay, cool. So I'm guessing y'all are going to want to see some information that you can use to make a solid choice. Is that right? And they say, oh yeah, we got to go over the proposals. We're going to do that next week or whatever it might be. And you say, great, I'm going to send over information for you guys to go over. What I'd love to do though is have the chance to review the information, because a lot of people feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the different options and components to it. And I want to make sure that I can clarify, answer any questions, and make sure that you have all the information you need to make a solid choice when you do sit down and make the final decision. What works best for you? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon? When can everybody get together for a quick 15-minute call? Now, my experience is 70 to 80% of the time, the couple is going to say yes to that second call, or if you're doing a site inspection like you would for a venue, to that second conversation. And when you get that date time nailed down, that's when you send out information inviting all the decision makers to get on the call. Now, if you've ever done a phone call with like 4 people on it, it's super awkward. It's really confusing. You don't know who's supposed to talk. There's no visual cues. So Zoom is perfect for that, because there seems to be an order to which people carry on the conversation. So if you know, for instance, that mom and dad are putting the credit card down on the venue deposit, you need to talk directly with mom and dad before you are going to get a decision. I certainly wouldn't trust the couple to be the people who are selling the venue on my behalf. I think I'm a better salesperson than them. I'm sure you, Jonathan, think you're a better salesperson than the couples you two are around with, just as all of the people who are listening to this right now feel like they're the best salesperson for their company. Don't trust the couple to do the selling for you. You need to get to the person who has the credit card so that you can convince them that you're the best fit.
Sam, this is really challenging, kind of how I'm thinking about this conversation, like the second conversation that happens after the tour. Because I think as folks in the venue industry, whether you're a sales manager, venue manager, owner, et cetera, you are creating a very intentional opportunity for the couple to tour, right? You're scheduling them, you're saying, hey, I'm gonna meet you at this time and place, you're maybe giving them instructions around driving directions, like all of that. And there's a lot of information out there about that. But then the next stage, most people aren't, pulling out their checkbook or credit card right away and taking the payment. They're looking at other venues, they're going back and reviewing. So now there's no intentionality, there's only follow-up. And the follow-up generally, like you said, happens like, yeah, let me know what you think. You're kind of throwing the ball to them and allowing them to pass it back, instead of having intentionality around having that second booking discussion, which is really what it is. Because when you have that, you have an opportunity to say, hey, great, I answered all your questions, anything else, or can I get this sent over? Boom, yes, we can get it sent over. You're actually asking for the sale. And I don't think people in our industry are asking for the sale.
That's right. Asking for the sale is something that most people do not do. And you wonder why you're getting ghosted. Well, you're getting ghosted because you never asked for a second date. Like, getting ghosted is a dating metaphor, right? Like, I got ghosted. I thought we were in a relationship, everything was going well, and then all of a sudden they disappeared. But the thing is, you never had a relationship with a couple. You just spent a little bit of time emailing with them, or maybe they walked around with you for half an hour, and then you're like, okay, great. Let me know if you're interested. You have to ask them out on another date. How are you going to get that other date if nobody asked for it? So if you want to get to contract and deposit, you've got to set yourself up an opportunity. That means preparing a proposal after your first date and saying, hey, you know what? I had a really great time. I felt like it was a really good fit on price, personality, and the experience that you and your family and friends are going to have here at the venue. I'd love to send over a proposal to see if this is going to be a good fit long term. What do you think? They say, yeah, we really loved it. Or maybe they say, no, it wasn't a very good experience for us. We aren't really that interested. Now you just save all yourself the time, headache, and worry about that couple. They didn't ghost you. You just agreed that it wasn't worth going out on a second date. How relieving for you. But let's say it does go forward. And let's say that you are, that they are interested. Now you're like, great. So here's what other couples have found works really well is if we set up an opportunity to have another conversation, but let's bring all the people in and have a discussion about what it would look like for us to move forward. And you can say this in a way where it's like, look, Sarah and Steve, I don't want to put you in a position where you're answering a bunch of questions for mom and dad and either A, making it up, or B, feeling like you should be a part-time employee for my venue because you have to try and sell them on why you love it so much. Let me do that. Let me get in the middle. Let me take the bullets for you on the hard questions. Let me explain what it is that y'all are going to love most about getting married here. That's my job. That's why I'm here. I'm in your corner.
Yeah, and again, I'm hearing intentionality, and I'm also hearing, it's not high pressure sales tactics. You're just wanting to give them the best opportunity to not have to remember every single detail from all the other venues that they've toured, but you're giving them an opportunity to have a trusted, representative and ally for them in a conversation with some decision makers. And whether they, if they choose to not go with you, no problem. But again, you're doing that over Zoom. You're not wondering, hey, where'd they go? You're not wondering that. Sam, something else that I kind of, you're talking, I'm thinking about this. I feel like a lot of times we have relationships on accident, right? It's kind of the relationships that, the people that we pass on a daily basis, or our family or friends we happen to meet. And really what we're talking about here is intentionally creating relationships and asking people to make decisions, which is tough for a lot of people, right? What is your...
It is.
Yeah, help me understand, kind of unpack that a little bit more as far as like helping people make decisions without coming across like high pressure or salesy or trying to like close someone, but at the same time, like we've got to help them make a decision.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because my wife and I were interested in buying a new car. And so I'm literally in the middle of car shopping right now. And it is fascinating to see the different sales tactics that car salesmen use. And what's not surprising are some of the salesy, sleazy sales tactics that I'm experiencing. Most of them focused on things like scarcity, for instance. But what is surprising is how many of them sound like a lot of the proposals and correspondence that I read from coaching clients that hire me to do a sales process audit. And I see a lot of these kind of hard sales tactics in the wedding space, which is surprising because we oftentimes associate them only with, kind of scuzzy positions like used car salesman, like I'm actually dealing with. But to your question, I think the way that you do it in a way that doesn't feel like a used car salesman is that you look at it, instead of selling, you look at it as helping. How can you help your couples who are looking for a place to get married get what they want and need? And the conversation then turns because you don't feel like you're doing something that's immoral or unethical or pushy or salesy because you're not selling, you're helping. And so the questions that you ask are in good faith. They're curious. You're curious about what's really going on. You're trying to uncover what the actual issue is so that you can offer a solution that's going to help them get what they really need. Not just the functional need of dates, rates, and spaces, but the emotional needs of feeling like they made a good choice, or picking a date that's going to work for everybody, or having a venue manager that's going to help sort out some of the group dynamics that have been frustrating, or making it easy for them not to stress about having all of the equipment being brought in because you provided at your venue. Whatever it may be, you're out seeking the problems that they're running into and then offering a solution that's going to make their lives better. And that's how I always look at it. I look at that when I was working at the Olive Garden selling, unlimited salad, soup, and breadsticks. When I was cold calling for the college that I went to as a member of the team that was trying to generate, scholarship fund income through people's donations. Working as a venue manager and doing the coaching that I do now and selling the services that we sell, like copywriting for websites, all of that is done because I know that it helps people and it gets people what it is that they want and need. So look at it that way. It goes away from selling and instead turns into something that makes you feel really good about what you're doing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really powerful. And I'd like to spend the last bit of our time together today talking about, you mentioned kind of a sales process audit. I'd love to start, you do so much with on the marketing space, right? And so ideally, marketing processes, converting leads or converting, kind of light interest and intention to buy signals, website searches and things like that, to a sale, to a booking, right? What things are you seeing as really common things that a lot of people are missing that's putting friction in between the process when you have someone who's showing those intent to buy signals, they're doing website searches, and then there's booking? What are those points of friction that you're commonly seeing from your coaching clients?
Yeah, so when I do sales process audits, I usually start with just a quick sweep of online presence and then contact form. I go through and look at the inquiry response, correspondence back and forth, discovery call, questions, and then proposal. And that's essentially the sales process. So I dig into each one of those. Let's see, some common problems that I see that are really debilitating in the sales process moving forward. Contact form is the number one. Early on, I see people putting too much friction in the contact form. There's an inverse relationship between the number of form fields you have and the number of inquiries you get, meaning that the more form fields you have for them to fill out, the fewer inquiries you get. The fewer form fields you have, the more inquiries you're going to get. I went to somebody's website today. She's a planner that we work with, and she was saying that she doesn't get any inquiries even with her new website. And so I went through and I looked at the contact form, and there were 16 questions on the contact form. So if I'm Gen Z or late stage millennial and I'm on my phone waiting for my friend to arrive at the bar, and I've got a glass of wine and she's a few minutes late, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'll inquire with this person that I'm interested in or this venue that I'm interested in. And you go and you start filling it out, and then you're like, thumb swipe, more fields, thumb swipe, more fields, thumb swipe, still more fields. You're not even going to fill out the contact form. You're going to close it out and write them off as a venue that you don't like anymore. So all that work was done to get them to the point where they were supposed to contact you, right? That's the point of the contact form, is to contact you, not to gather information like the IRS would, where you want to know everything about them before they inquire. So I would keep it real simple: name and email required. I'd put down date that you have in mind. I'd put down some open form field about, tell us more about what kind of wedding you're interested in having, something along those lines. And I'd call it good with that. Dump all the other fields. Second thing that I see happen is the next thing that occurs in the sales process, which is the inquiry response. And most people that I know, especially venue managers, love a good automated email response. And what they do, because they don't have to do any work, is they pack it full of all the information, big long email, 300, 400, 800 words with all sorts of attachments that are in there. Could be pricing guides, could be brochures, could be sample menus, could be layouts, could be, links to X, Y, and Z. And then you hope that somebody gets back to you. I call it the PDF and pray approach, where you get an automated response, you send out a PDF, and you pray that somebody actually responds to it. But what ends up happening is that it's like an avalanche of information that hits the couple. And all of a sudden they're like, how can I wade through these 10 to 12 screens worth of text and all of these attachments? I don't even know which ones they are because I can't read the files because it's on my phone. And so I don't even get a preview of anything. And so they don't end up opening any of the links. They don't end up going through and looking at the attachments. They don't read any of the copy. And again, you wonder why nobody's getting back to you and why they're ghosting you. It's because you're scaring the crap out of them with your inquiry response. Another thing that I see a lot of challenge on is sending detailed pricing information up front. And oftentimes that occurs on that initial inquiry response. Most people are not ready for pricing specifics. They want to know how much it costs to start looking at your services. But when you share all of the information in that email, plus all the pricing and the packages, and then an FAQ attachment, like there's no reason to carry on the conversation unless they're ready to book. And if that's your goal, to only deal with people who are ready to book, by all means, keep doing that. But if you're wondering why you're not getting enough people to move forward past the first step, it's probably because of those reasons.
So many, I've got so many questions on each one of those pieces. And so we'll unpack some of this because that was all so good. So on the contact form, I think you mentioned 4 things. You said name, email, like phone number, and then some sort of general open form, or maybe like a date. Yeah, date. So
not phone number.
Not phone number. Okay, not phone number.
I think phone number is pretty personal. Okay. I think a lot of people feel like if you give somebody your phone number that you're giving away your personal freedom. It's a real challenge, I think, for people to want to give up that phone number. I've looked at Hotjar recordings, screen records of people filling out contact forms. Phone number is something that oftentimes lead to form abandonment. I don't know, I'll tell you a funny story. So my brother He and I are pretty close. I'm actually going down to see him in a couple of days. He calls me unexpectedly all the time, and I leave my phone on do not disturb. But even when it rings, I'm like, Ben's calling. Like, what does he want? Like, why didn't he set up an appointment? Like, I'm busy. I got work to do here, man. And like, he's my own brother, right? If I call my brother Ben, and like, I'll call him out of the blue, or I'll text him and I'll say, hey, bud, you got a second to chat? And like, he's like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, everything's okay. He's like, oh, you just like, it's just not normal for me to get phone calls from you out of the blue. And he's my brother. I love him. We talk all the time. And even he is like, okay, I got to make a decision on whether or not like this is something that I want to spend time on. So I think getting calls from strangers out of the blue is usually problematic and not something that you're going to get a lot of access.
Okay, so this is interesting though, because earlier you were talking about how you want to connect more with the clients. We were talking about Zoom and things like that. At what point then do you get or gather the phone number so that you can reach out to them through text or through, because if you're not asking for the phone number on that initial contact form, you can't text them, you can't call them. You're basically only emailing them or direct messaging them if they inquire, if there's some sort of touch point on direct message. And sometimes people's inboxes are full of all of the other stuff that's going on in the wedding planning. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, again, the rule of thumb is to, respond to people in the way that they respond to you. So if they email, you email back. The goal of the contact form is to get them to contact you. So I think that anything that doesn't make that easier or more likely to occur, you should question whether or not it needs to be there. So I don't think that having them fill out another form field with something they feel is kind of private, like their phone number, is going to encourage people to fill that form out more. So that's why I would hold that back. But again, when you respond to the inquiry, the goal is to schedule a call with them, not to actually make the phone call. You want to set up an opportunity where they're in a good state of mind. They're open to the conversation. They are ready and prepared for what it is that you're going to talk about. If you call somebody out of the blue and they pick up the phone and you're like, hey, it's Sam from so-and-so venue. You left an inquiry for me and I thought I'd give you a call and see if we could talk about your wedding. And they're like, I'm sorry, I'm at work. Like, I'm working now. Yeah. I submitted that inquiry last night when I was at home having a glass of wine, watching the game with my fiance because I was bored by it. I decided to do some venue hunting and I submitted the inquiry, but I don't want to talk to you right now. I'm working. That's what they're thinking in their head. So I would remember that the goal of the contact form is to get them to contact you. The goal of the inquiry response is to set a date and time at which you all know that you're having a conversation about your venue, about booking that service from you. And so, get the call scheduled. And then once you get the call scheduled, after they've made the appointment, that's when you can worry about, okay, great. Do you want to do a call or do you want to do Zoom?
Mm-hmm. A question then about that. So once you do the call, let's say you kind of have an initial dialogue, right? And so you have requested their phone number, or let's say they provided it because they're like, hey, we're going to do a call. They don't want to do a Zoom, whatever, right? So they give you the phone number, and now you have their phone number. Is there any sort of follow-up process that you feel like is appropriate to kind of help develop the lead a little bit and maybe cut through some of that noise? Does calling on the phone play a role in that, or really are you trying to use other mediums again because you don't want to, you're seeing that phone calling is maybe not working?
I would want to schedule the next activity when I'm on that current activity. So that's just another general best practice for anything in sales. Like, you're always trying to get the next activity scheduled. So when somebody's on your website, you're trying to get them to reach out to you. When they reach out to you, you're trying to get them to set up a call. When you're on the call, you're trying to set up a site tour. When you're on the site tour, you're trying to set up the second phone call. When you're second phone call, you're trying to set up the deposit request and the contract being signed. So, that's if it all works out ideal. Now, I think to your real question, which is if they don't want to come in or they ghost you or whatever, what do you do then, knowing that you've got this, piece of gold information, their phone number, what do you do with it? I would still say that on the call, if they're a bit evasive, I would ask, that's great, sounds good. I love that you're going to go ahead and just, check out other venues before you commit to touring, knowing that that's the next step you're trying to get. And then I would say something like, I want to make sure that I'm there for you when you need it, but I also don't want to be, super stalker and, call you every day or email you every day. What's the best way for me to follow up? And then they're going to share with you what they would like you to do. If it's phone call, text, great, amazing, use that. If it's email, do that. If they say wait, you wait. If you can, ask for a time frame. Great, all that sounds good. I know that dates are flying out there, and there's a lot of pressure to book your date. Do you guys have a sense of what kind of turnaround you're looking at? Most of the couples that we work tend to, go about 2 to 3 weeks from inquiry to actually choosing a venue. What kind of time frame are you looking at? So, you see what I did there in that word track. I slipped in some social proof to let them know, hey, this is the way that the herd is going, and you should follow that herd down a safe path to picking your venue in the right amount of time. You don't have to do it right away, but you shouldn't wait more than 2 or 3 weeks. And usually people will go, oh yeah, we're looking at things like this weekend, we'll have some more ideas. Okay, great. So should I ping you on like Monday if I haven't heard from you? Like, what's a good time frame? Now you're using the power of suggestion to create, actually what it is reduce cognitive load. So it's easier for them to go yes or no rather than come up with the next activity or the next time. So, simple basic things like this are going to help grease the path forward for you.
That's awesome. So, such a good explanation of it. One more thing that I quickly, and we're obviously not going to have time to break down the whole process, and I think that's the beauty of this. We get to kind of tease it a little bit, dive into it a little bit, and get an understanding, and then maybe folks can reach out to you more if they're interested in going through this. But as part of what you said if you're only interested in talking to clients that are ready to book right away, and what you're kind of implying, or what I heard you implying, was you should maybe have a roster of clients who maybe are not ready to make that immediate purchase decision, but who might be warm leads who are not ready in the next week or two, but they're maybe ready in the next 30, 45, 60 days to make that decision as they assess their financial picture or whatever. Give us just briefly here some ways that you reactivate or you kind of keep that warm list warm, and maybe even move some of those folks that really truly are not ready to make that decision right away, but are looking to make it a month later or something like that. How do you keep them engaged as potential clients?
So I'll give you two tips here. One is real simple, basic touch point, which is, you can send out an email. Hey, hope you all are doing well. Wonder how the wedding planning is going. Thought you might find this piece of content valuable. I mean, you're not going to say that, but essentially that's what you're saying in the email. And then you send over like 2 or 3 links to blog posts that you and ChatGPT have written together. And they could be listicles like top 7 things to make sure you nail down before choosing your venue, or 14 questions I wished I would have asked the venue manager on my site inspection, or 3 ways to negotiate parents and fiancés who can't agree on a date, right? So like you're thinking about how can you help them knock over the obstacles that are getting in the way to booking the venue? And you and I, Jonathan, both know like there are some pretty frequent culprits when it comes to why couples won't move forward. One of them is they can't figure out a date. They may love the venue, but they can't all figure out what date is going to work for everybody. Or maybe they ask a bunch of questions and they tour it around, but everything kind of feels the same and they don't know how to differentiate between the venues. So what if you gave them the tools to actually knock over that obstacle and get past that barrier to be able to then be in a buying window to say yes to you? So I would send over some pieces of content that are already on your website. It shows again that you're helping them solve problems that are getting in the way. It feels like you're reading their mind and they appreciate that. And it brings them back to your website, which eventually they'll start to kind of go through and spend a little bit more time on. The second thing, and this is a real solid nugget, is you send over your updated availability calendar to them once a week. And this is really powerful because it it lets them know what's open and available, but they'll also start to feel a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit of the scarcity set in. And scarcity is very powerful. You don't need a lot of it. Like the car salesman who sent me a text saying, hey, any chance you want to come in a day earlier than you scheduled your test drive would be good, because I feel like this is a hot car and may go sooner before you get here. Like, that's pretty salesy, right? Mm-hmm. But if they would go through after, say, the weekend and let me know, hey, just want to let you know that we did a bunch of tours, or we did a bunch of test drives, and the car that you have is still available. Or, hey, we had 3 of them, but now only 2 of them are left. Like, I would find that helpful without being pushy. So when I was selling venues, what I would do is I would take the end of the weekend after I did a bunch of tours and I got some contracts, or I put some soft holds out, and I would take the availability calendar, which I would share publicly with anybody who was actively interested in the venue. I would send over just a simple document that showed the calendar with grayed out dates that were no longer available every Sunday afternoon. Hey, Sarah and Steve, hope you guys are doing well. Seems like just yesterday that you were up here. I know it's been 3 weeks. I hope you've had some opportunities to tour other venues. If you're still interested, our venue just opened up a few extra or closed down a few other dates. I wanted to make sure you had the most updated availability calendar. Anything pop out at you that you want to put a hold on? ? And I just leave it at that. And I would do that every Sunday to anybody who was active. And without a doubt, I would get somebody to go, you know what? I'm so glad you did that. We totally forgot about it. I'm so glad our date's available. Here's a deposit. Or can you hold it till tomorrow till we can call and give you a credit card? There was usually some activity that would move a deal forward. And, you do that once a week, you get one person every week to move forward. That's, 50 dates a year. That's a lot of business. That's
a huge amount of business. And a lot of venues, they need that. That's important. That's meaningful revenue for them. Well, that's huge. Bonus question here right at the end. I said I had just one last one, but bonus question.
Hit me with it, buddy. Hit me with it.
You mentioned dates, sharing the calendar, right? Are you a fan of putting your calendar on your website so it's publicly available, or would you hold that off of the website and use it as a tool further along in the process?
I would not put it on the website. I would withhold it and make them inquire. The goal of the website is to drive inquiries to your inbox. That's the number one highest goal that your website has. And so if you share all the information with people, including the availability, which is probably the most fundamental question for a venue, then you preclude the need for them to reach out. And so if you instead withhold it, but then offer it relatively quickly and say, yes, we're available, and we're also available for all these other dates, then it, one, starts a conversation, but 2, gets them thinking about other dates that maybe they hadn't yet considered. I think at some point businesses move from, I want to fill my calendar, to I want to make as much money with the dates that are on my calendar. That's a big jump in owning a venue. And so, when you get to that stage where you're transitioning from, I want to fill my calendar, to I want to charge more for the dates on my calendar, it's really important to make sure that you are doing what you can to drive peak season revenue, and also make sure that you're filling in those shoulder season dates. And that can be done very well by creating a dynamic pricing structure where, maybe the top 10% dates are being charged super peak or peak rates. And, maybe the next 10 to 30% of the dates are being charged shoulder or peak dates rates. And then the remaining balance, say 60, 70%, are those off-season dates. And you're doing what you can to bring more people and fill the calendar on those dates. When I was selling venues, I remember the first year that I started selling at the resort, we had 13 events on the dates in July and August. And the last year that I sold, we had 60 events out of 62 dates. So when people tell me like, oh, I'm full, I'm like, really? Are you full? Like, talk to me about full. Because my culinary team knew what full was. They were coming at me with their chef knives because they were doing an event every day for 2 months. Because there's so many more opportunities that are out there. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Sundays, Saturdays during non-peak dates. And you can use a dynamic pricing strategy to move people to those dates. Look at movie theaters. I don't know if you saw this, Jonathan, but last month, AMC, the largest movie theater chain, announced last month that not only were they charging different rates for different times, which they started doing, more than just matinee and night, many, many years ago, they made that change. But now they're actually charging dynamically based on where your seat is in the theater. So the best seats that are in the middle, say midway or 2/3 of the way back, those are at a premium. The ones that are off to the side are less expensive. The ones that are way up or way down are less expensive. So movie theaters are doing what airline companies and hotels have done for decades now, which is really getting hyper local on where they're going to put their price points. And so I think that venues have a huge opportunity to do that. And by withholding that until somebody inquires, you have more of an opportunity to massage it and guide it and modify it and change it without putting off the people who have already inquired that may be going back later. So you have rate flexibility and more control over what it is that the conversation is directed towards.
That's super powerful, and you're totally right, because if they're going back, if you're publishing all that information or your pricing, and people are seeing the pricing fluctuate, they're going to go, come on, what's going on here? But they don't see the other side of it, which is running the business, which is maybe that date got 6 requests versus another date that's been really hard to get one.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was fielding inquiries, if I got say 2 or 3 requests for say Saturdays in July, or even Saturdays in July and August, I would, when the 4th inquiry came in, I would have an updated price calendar that had an increase of $500, $1,000, $2,000. If I had people who were fighting over dates, I would increase the price on the 3rd person or the 4th person that would inquire. And if you publish that stuff online, you can get yourself into trouble. I mean, I think that there are ethical ways to get out of that by just saying, look, we, like airline companies, we change the rates. Like, it could be different within 8 seconds. No promises. It is what it is when you book. But until it goes into your cart and it says cart expires in 25 minutes with a countdown clock on it, it's not set in stone. But that still feels kind of yucky, right? So you don't want to do that very much. You instead want to have a piece of collateral that you can send out privately to people who will never know each other and never talk with each other. And as long as you feel good about, charging more or less for dates, depending on what your model is, then I think your ethics will allow you to sleep at night.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sam, this is all just like such incredible information. I think people need to hear it. Venue owners need to hear it. Small businesses within the wedding and event space as well need to hear it. And there's a lot of good stuff. If people are interested in diving in more and maybe getting one of those audits, or just kind of understanding more about the dynamic pricing that you're talking about, or whatever, what's the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah, best place is to go to Instagram. Ideaction Consulting is a good spot. We offer little nuggets 3 or 4 times a week. Another great place, free content, is the podcast that I do. I have Own Your Business podcast, which is for wedding and event professionals, talks about sales, pricing, copywriting. That's a great place to get information. I've got a newsletter that I send out to almost 6,000 wedding professionals every Wednesday. And you can get that by going to ideactionconsulting.com. And at the bottom, you can sign up for the newsletter with your name and email address. If you are interested specifically in the sales process audit, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I do respond to those. I'm the one who gets back to people, and happy to share some more information with you.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you so much, Sam. Thanks again for coming on. And again, I feel like we just scratched the surface. We might have to have you back for a 3rd time. But this was awesome. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jonathan. I'm glad it was useful, and I'll ring you back in 6 months and we can get the next one on the books.
Amazing. We'll do it.